employees are now looking to their leaders for activism, and they want to know where they really stand on things like inclusivity, on sustainability, and it's not enough just to hide behind a policy or an empty pledge on a website or an email, in a town hall or whatever. So I think, HR have a real role to play in terms of supporting their leadership about what does activism really, really look and feel like.
Welcome to the HR L&D Podcast, where we explore cutting-edge HR trends and best practices with top leaders who are shaping the future of work. My name is Nick Day and I'm founder of JGA Recruitment Group, a specialist HR search firm. I'm also a qualified executive coach and a recognised HR thought leader listed on Thinkers 360. Together, we're going to dive into topics from diversity and inclusion to technology, learning curation and employee experience to help you evolve your people and your development strategies. So whether you're a flourishing HR executive, a rising manager or a seasoned CHRO who's driving transformation, this podcast is for you. So grab your coffee, let's play.
The HR L&D Podcast. My name is Nick Day, CEO at JGA Recruitment Group, and we are specialist HR recruiters. I'm really excited today because we're going to be putting inclusivity at the top of the leadership agenda in today's show, because I'm joined by Teresa Boughey, who is the CEO of the award-winning consultancy Jungle HR and founder of Inclusion 24/7. For those not familiar, she's a TEDx speaker and author of the Amazon best-selling book, Closing the Gap: 5 Steps for Creating an Inclusive Culture. And that was designed to support business professionals and leaders like you listening to this show at every stage of your inclusivity journey. It was highly commended as an exceptional book that promotes diversity at the Business Book Awards 2020. Now, today I sit down with Teresa to speak about why companies should be linking their ESG strategies with their DEI strategies. We talk about HR trends to consider, how to create lasting change through HR transformation, which it appears all of you seem to be going through at this moment in time. And perhaps most importantly, of course, we explore why putting an inclusive culture should be at the top of your leadership agenda today. Of course, if you do enjoy today's show, you can find out more about today's guest by checking out the show notes, where links to both Teresa's book and her Jungle HR consultancy can be found, along with, of course, our own links. And I'll ask one favour of you all: if you do enjoy today's show, please share it with one HR colleague or one friend, so that together we can continue to raise the profile of people management and human resources for everyone. But that just leaves me to say, without further ado, welcome, Teresa, to the HR L&D Podcast. How are you feeling today?
Yes, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for such a warm welcome.
Delighted to have you. I'm going to ask you my first question, something I ask all of my guests, which is this: what do the words human resources mean to you?
Oh gosh, great question to kick us off with. It's people, actually, really at the centre of this. It's our unique difference. We are individuals, and we are a key component of society and of organisations. So we are a key, dare I say, resource, but there is that beautiful human element within it. So that's what it means to me. It's about our unique difference and how we apply those in society and the workplace.
Fantastic. What a great start to the show. Now, I know you know a little bit about your background. I've watched your fantastic TEDx talk as well, which I would put a link to the show notes. I advise everyone listening to this, check that out and go and watch the video. But just so, because I know a bit about your background, for listeners that don't, I wonder if you could just bring your story to the fore, particularly about in relation to inclusivity, of course, but how your journey also inspired your fantastic book, Closing the Gap. We're going to get into more detail about during the course of today's show.
Sure, thanks. Well, I'm going to take you back what probably feels like 100 years. I was a teenage mum. So I had my daughter when I was 16. And it was a really clearly a really difficult time, actually. It was at a time where, of course, they didn't have social media, because thank goodness. But it was my first experience, I guess, of really feeling like I didn't belong. I was incredibly frightened and scared and all of those things. And of course, I also had a social value label judgments levied at me at that particular time because of, dare I say, some life choices, I suppose, that I had made. And so I'm kind of telling you that for a reason, because it comes full circle in terms of where my passion for inclusivity and that real need for belonging absolutely sits. So I had my daughter and continued, of course, with my educational bit. I had to do it differently. So I had to study part-time, evening classes. So again, my social circle was incredibly different. Not my normal peers, as it were, at my age range. So again, I kind of didn't necessarily fit in all places with them. But even so, worked particularly hard and juggled all of those things that I know that many of your listeners, I'm sure, will be juggling as well, in terms of family life, as well as I say, building your education and trying to forge a career, because I knew that I wanted to be a role model for my daughter. I knew that I had, I'm going to say, my own aspirations, actually, that didn't need to be put on the back burner. And so I worked hard there, and I'm pleased to say that hard work paid off. Wasn't always easy along the journey, as you've articulated. There's lots of I'm going to say, stories that I share about my personal journey, which are detailed in the book. It's not an autobiography, I should say. It is definitely a business book. But yeah, definitely been a journey. I worked my way up in the HR space. So started in that administrative function, actually working for an NHS organisation many years ago, and it was supporting at that time health visitors and district nurses out in the community, and that's where I got my real taste actually for HR and really sort of onboarding staff and making them feel incredibly welcome. So again, continued with my studies. And managed to secure all of my CIPD professional qualifications. So, of course, those in the professions will know that's the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. And I landed what was an amazing role, actually, working for a travel company. And at the time, I hadn't realised how fabulous it was, in the sense of I worked for the group HR director, and he wanted somebody that was going to provide him with some administrative support. So I absolutely ticked that box. But he wanted somebody that he could mentor and that he could really develop on that journey. So for me, it was a fantastic opportunity, but I look back now and think, gosh, hadn't really appreciated how amazing it was. And I guess what I mean by that is I managed to have exposure to what ordinarily you wouldn't get exposure to until you are much further on your career in a really senior capacity. So I was exposed to things like mergers and acquisitions, executive remuneration, talent reviews, spanning across organizations, complete organizations restructures. And these are typically things, as I say, that happen much later on in your professional career. But Bill, his name is forever etched on my mind, was a brilliant mentor. And I just, as I say, had such an amazing opportunity to experience all of those things. So, of course, when I started then my sort of practical HR operational activity, I was like, oh, I've already done this, and that's quite familiar, and I knew what to do and or where to go. And I think that's the key thing as you progress along. You don't necessarily have the answers to everything, and that's a sign of a great leader, to kind of say, I don't know, but you surround yourself and you're not afraid to reach out and say, I don't know where I'm going with those things. So yeah, I'm answering your question in a really long way. Anyway, climbed the corporate ladder, moved on, held a number of senior HR roles, and again, had fantastic roles and opportunities. And then I had the fabulous gift, which is my son. My son came along, quite a big gap, as you can imagine, between my two children. And it was time for me to start a new journey of my career. And so I stepped off that corporate ladder. And typically, as I know that many people often do, they found it really difficult to juggle perhaps that senior sort of corporate role and family life. And I'd say for me, I really wanted to do something different. And I'd always wanted to set up my own consultancy and perhaps hadn't been brave enough to do it. But because I'd stepped off that treadmill with going on maternity leave, it was just a now or never moment. So I did. And that's when I set up my own consultancy practice, Jungle HR. And jungle really because it's a corporate jungle out there. There's real sustainability links, of course, to that as well. So jungle is one of the biggest, kind of most diverse environments that we have on our planet. So there's real links there, as I say, with the diversity space as well. And we've had an amazing journey so far. We've worked on some fabulous projects, delighted so many of our clients, which is fantastic. And yeah, as you say, I'm the author of Closing the Gap: 5 Steps to Creating an Inclusive Culture. I'm a TEDx speaker. What else do I do? I'm a business board advisor for the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Women and Work, and I chair the ESG work stream. I'm a non-executive director for an NHS hospital trust. And this year I was a UK delegate for UN Women. So I'm pretty proud, if I'm honest, in terms of where I'm at. And I often pinch myself when I go back full circle to what I started off several moments ago saying. I was a teenage mum that left school with a baby and a lot of kind of negative criticism that I would never make anything of myself.
As you should be. Incredibly proud, incredible journey. We're going to get into some of those things you highlighted during the course of today's show. And actually, you won't know this, Teresa, but your story has a lot of resonance for me for a couple of reasons. One is my mum, for those who may or may not know, was also a teenage, she got married at 17, not a teenage mum, she was married at 17. But she also had to come out of school early, in a PhD in her 40s. And she's a lot of the journey there. But my sister was a teenage mum. So she went through a lot of the similar things that you did. As well. So I've got some understanding of that, but also the juggling and going on your own. So for me, I didn't take paternity leave either with the children. And I don't believe in regrets, but it was one of those things that if I probably could change around, I was trying to juggle one thing and didn't do the other. And it can be really challenging. So the fact you get to where you have best-selling author and all these things that you're doing, which I'm keen to get into, I think is high praise indeed for myself, and I'm sure for those listening in. So let's talk a little bit then and start with the book. I want to get into later on your role with the Female Entrepreneurship Ambassador Program that you're part of as well. We'll get a little bit later on. But starting with your book, it's called Closing the Gap: 5 Steps to Creating an Inclusive Culture. It's very much for HR business leaders to give them a methodology. You talked about mentorship. Lovely to hear your running phrase of Phil. It's great to hear that there's some really positive male and female mentors out there willing to help. But this book, as I understand it, is about helping leaders to embed inclusive practices into all future strategies. Tell us a little bit more about what that's about and what leaders might get from it.
Sure, thank you. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a book that provided, as you say, those practical solutions. And one thing I know, as I say, from working with organisations and supporting them on that journey, that it's not just a tick box approach, that it absolutely has to be a holistic approach to inclusion. And we know that organisations really do have a desire to want to do something. They might not know quite where to start, or what they may often do is they may have multiple singular initiatives that they engage upon. So they might say, okay, this year we're going to focus on X, for example. It might be gender, and next year we're going to focus on race, and then the year after we're going to look at disability. And I'm going to say, unfortunately, they don't always work in that linear space. So it's around, okay, what can we do holistically, and how can we make sure that the initiatives that we are embarking upon are right for our organisation, because there's definitely not a one size that fits all. Sure. And how do we ensure that they are embedded within the organization? So again, they don't just form sort of part of this is what we're doing this year, and it becomes tokenistic. And so within the book, I created a methodology to guide organizations, their leadership teams, as you say, their HR professionals through that space. So the first element is we have to take stock. We have to really, really look at what do we have right now. So as I say, there are many organizations that are already doing some brilliant things. But again, is it holistic? Are we getting stuck in the data and we're not moving too much further than that? And obviously, we've had gender pay reporting in the UK, for example, for those larger organizations for a number of years. That in itself brings a level of transparency. But of course, for smaller organizations, they may not have that, but it doesn't mean that they can't start measuring that data. So as I say, the first step is, take stock. What do you have? What is your data, both the soft intel and the hard intel? What is it telling you? Because of course, sometimes the numbers tell you one thing, but people's experiences of an organization, and I use the word people quite broadly, it's not just about your employees, it's about your customers, it's about your communities that you serve, all of those things. So again, taking that holistic approach, let's widen the sphere when we take stock. So that's the first thing. We then move into raise awareness. So this is all around how do we engage people on that journey? How do we really start to widen those conversations around, I'm going to say, why is inclusivity important? And for us, we lean into that ESG space as well, which I think we might be covering on a little bit later, but it's about that long-term sustainable future. So why are these conversations important? So this is all around kind of the raise awareness piece. The next element is inspire and involve. So, we often say it's great to have those accessible role models. So is there someone that I'm going to say almost looks like me, or is perhaps, as you described, being on a journey, and there is some way that you can resonate with that individual. In many ways, I'm going to say it almost gives you hope that then says, crikey, that person has overcome those things, and it enables me to think about what that means for me and what I could potentially do. But that, as I say, inspire and involve piece is, when we talk about inclusion, it's not the role of one, it's the coming together of many. So what is everybody's role that they play when it comes to inclusivity and creating that culture of belonging? We then move into build for the future. So building for the future, what's our organisation structures? What's our policies and procedures? How are we starting to think about attracting that talent of the future? So all of those things sit within that. Let's really, really be clear. What are we aiming for? What do our customers want? What do our stakeholders want? What do our employees want? And therefore, how do we create and shape that future so that we can almost reverse engineer and work out, okay, well, we want to be here, but we're here now. So what are the steps that we have to put in place? And then the final one that often gets forgotten is embed. And this goes back to what I said at the beginning. Organizations have many things that they're doing, but they're often not connected together, and therefore they are not embedded within an organization. Or you may have a brilliant senior leader who is championing inclusion, but if they leave for whatever reason, then is this going to be sustainable? So it's really important to embed that. And we created the model in a cyclical format, because you go back to the beginning and you will evaluate again and you will evolve. And if we know nothing about COVID or have learned nothing from COVID, it is that we absolutely have to evolve and work with the environment and the situation that we are at the moment. So that's the model and the framework, and it's in the book, and it's packed with lots of case studies and checklists. I love a good checklist. So there's checklists in there as well to help individuals on their journey.
Fantastic. Well, HR professionals do love a blueprint, and this is essentially what it is for them. So as I said, there will be a link in the show notes for those that want to find out more about that. I was picking out on some of the language you use, which I always find fascinating, but I think it's really important. You mentioned the word, finding the why, which I think is really important as part of that embedding, as we know, is often overlooked. The cyclical nature of it, which is, links to the evolution. We've seen HR departments and functions evolve, but they continue to evolve, and strategies and things will change. There's now more awareness I've seen this year, and I've ever seen before, in relation to, for example, policies around the menopause. That wasn't there 2-3 years ago. So we need to be evolving. We need to be re-evaluating what we're doing. I love the idea, I think it's a Simon On quote, who says, those who look outward, me, and we need to do that. This is what we want to get to. But actually, those who look inward, awaken. And I thought that was quite similar to the way you're talking about awareness. I think it's a really powerful blueprint for those that want to create a more inclusive culture, which is really important. So before we jump into, I do want to ask about how we can link ESG strategies to DEI strategies. Before I do, I found it really fascinating listening to your TEDx talk, and you talked a lot about diversity fatigue. Now, I know from doing this show, I've been talking about ED&I for a long time. It used to be equality. We moved, even that's evolved now to equity. And I think people feel like they've done it, or they don't know how to redo it, or they've lost the momentum, or people are no longer engaged. And you summed it up really nicely in your talk about, when you talk about diversity fatigue. I wonder if you just bring that to the audience's attention to see if maybe that's something they're suffering from within their organisations, and you may have some strategies for overcoming that.
Yeah, thanks. Gosh, I have to think back what I said at my TEDx. So for me, interesting. I do think the TEDx is as valid today as it was, obviously, when I was privileged to do it a number of years ago. And I think for me, that diversity fatigue really sets in because we often think that diversity is about someone else or something else, and it's a protected characteristic that I may not have, and therefore I'm currently either in the majority or in the minority. And that's where I think intersectionality really plays a significant part. And certainly when we're working with organisations, helping them to think about not only their why for inclusion and belonging, but to get them to think about their unique difference. And we get them to think about the protected characteristics, and they don't necessarily have to say it out loud, but even if they, in their own head, just sort of say, okay, well, I will have a preferred sexual orientation, for example, which is one of the protected characteristics. That could be in the minority, it could be in the majority, but I have one of those, and therefore how does that influence my thinking? We all have an age, we all have a particular faith, for example. So again, you could go through all of those protected characteristics, and suddenly you start to realize that actually you have an affinity with more than one of those than you ever thought that you did before. And it starts to help you to think about your own experience and how that's shaped your life, and perhaps if that wasn't present, what the impact of that would be. So again, this for me is really important when we are talking about inclusivity, and say when people do start to have that fatigue, and I still see, people roll their eyes and, they kind of think, oh gosh, off on that again. But it's just about understanding, say, the uniqueness that we all bring. And as a consequence, how can we create an environment where we have that opportunity to be at our best, to contribute, to offer something different, and we need to be open to that and curious, actually, what is it that you see that I either can't or don't, and how does that bring the richness to decision making, to conversations, to products and services that are created and offered. And those are the things that really excite me, actually, about this particular space.
Fantastic. You made that really, really clear. I think also something that came to my mind, I did a podcast recently for Hearing Inclusion Day. And it was a nice reminder for me to realise that we sometimes feel like it doesn't apply to us, right? Because we're in that majority potentially. I'm talking here now as a white, middle-aged, Caucasian male. But actually, I don't know what's around the corner. We don't know if tomorrow I may end up suffering something that puts me in a disability group, or things can happen. And it's about as you say, there's this conscious awareness, this conscious want to improve our businesses, improve the psychological safety for those around us so they can bring their whole self to work, all the things that come with it. Because we know, and the studies prove it, more diverse workforce brings better results, more creativity, but also a more inclusive culture also brings more productivity, more, people improve your retention as a recruiter. I know about that, and talent, things like that. So I think you made that really, really clear. It's a really, I think, robust argument to say, we need to reinvigorate our inclusivity, our policies, and really re-energize our workforces to buy into that. Now, we talked a little bit, or you talked a little bit earlier about in your jungle HR background, about how that links to ESG. You talked a little bit about your book as well. So I think it's quite interesting. We've not had a guest yet that's linked to ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance policies, if you like, to their DEI strategies. It's something that I'm passionate about. To give you some context, as a recruiter here, I don't tend to talk about recruitment, but I believe we're one of the only recruiters in the UK that actually offer to greenify our hires. So what that means is we try and offset the carbon footprint for each placement we make for 1 year. So what we do for each placement we make, for those that want to take that option, we do it through carbon emissions, so 12.7 tons of certified carbon credits, 34 kilograms of plastic waste comes out of the sea, and we plant 8 trees for each placement. And that's our attempt at trying to offset the carbon footprint for each placement. So it's something that's quite passionate for us. For you, and for HR leaders listening out there at the moment, how can we link ESG? Why is it important we even do so? And how can we connect the two to DEI?
Yeah, it's again, it's a huge passion of mine as well. I think it's a moving target, I think, is the first thing to talk about. It's not new, however, it does appear to be, and to quite rightly have surfaced to the top of many leadership agendas, and in part it's because we are hurtling very, very quickly towards the 2030 targets that were set by the United Nations and their Sustainable Development Global Goals. And again, not all organizations know about those. I was really shocked. I spoke at a conference earlier this year. Last year, gosh, time goes in a bit of a walk, doesn't it? When you're virtual. I spoke at a conference, it was a room full of accountants, actually, and there was over 200 of them in the room, and we talked about linking ESG and inclusion together. And not one of them, when I asked them if they had come across the United Nations, Sustainable Development Goals, not one of them put their hands up, and that for me was quite alarming, actually. So they were either kind of really terrified, which I doubt, or they were suddenly introduced to something that they hadn't either had that knowledge of before. And I'm sure there will be lots of organizations that do that. But as a consequence, it is rising to the top of business agendas, and I think it's coming for a whole host of reasons. As I say, the countdown is most definitely on. With that, we've got kind of 6 years actually now to achieve those goals. But actually, I think the societal demands are going to be very, very different. So if we link this in with our people, then our people, and that kind of, again, broadest sense, our employees, our customers, our stakeholders, and society are demanding that organizations do something very, very different in order to create, and I'm going to say, a more sustainable planet, but to safeguard it, actually. And so those things will be driving what organizations choose to do. So employees are now becoming much more discerning about who they want to work for, notwithstanding that, we might be in an economic crisis, but they are still very, very particular. Do I want to work for an organization that, as I say, doesn't have a solid inclusivity approach? And what about their sustainability approach? What is their vision for creating that sustainable future? So those are some of the key drivers that organizations really, really need to start to lean into. And I know from the work that I do on the all-party parliamentary groups, as I say, I chair the ESG work stream. what we know at the moment is, of course, that the measurements that are coming through in those scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 reportings typically tend to be affected by much more of those larger organizations. However, and this is the bit that we're going, hang on a minute, because we are all, anybody that runs a business is likely to fit into somebody's supply chain. And because you're in that supply chain, there are likely to be questions that are asked of you when you submit a tender to deliver a piece of work, for example. And therefore, what is your approach to sustainability and inclusivity? So that is why it's absolutely critical that organisations lean into that. And of course, sustainability in its broadest sense can be anything from, well-being as well as the planetary impact as well. So there's lots of things that organisations should and could do, but it's not going anywhere, and it absolutely will be a measure of organisation success going forward.
Have you ever asked yourself, how can any recruiter understand my HR recruitment challenges? Please don't give up on your hiring challenges just yet. Here at JGA HR Recruitment, we appreciate the difficulties associated with attracting, recruiting and retaining top human resources talent. We also understand just how costly a poor hire can be. JGA HR Recruitment would like to partner with you to help you overcome your hiring challenges. Contact us today on 01727 800 377 or visit jgarecruitment.com to find out more.
Absolutely. You said it's rising to the top of the agenda. Obviously, the top of the conversation today is actually making inclusivity or making inclusive culture top of the leadership agenda. Tell me why you believe that's so important to do that. Well, why should inclusive culture be right at the top of the leadership agenda now?
Yeah, so it's because, again, I'm going to say post-pandemic. We're not entirely post the pandemic, by the way. But I think, post that, I genuinely believe that employees and the wider society had that opportunity to pause. They had that opportunity to say, what am I doing with my life? Is this how I want to be living my life? Is this how, as I say, I want to be engaging with organisations? And I want something different. I want there to be a purpose in my life. I want it to be linked with, as I say, what I'm doing. But I want to feel like I belong. And that's why it is really important that organisations tune into, the importance of inclusivity, because we want to feel like we're part of something as opposed to just a number. So go back to the question you asked me right at the beginning, what does HR mean? It's about, the human element of, I'm going to say, the ability to use our skills and expertise and apply it within our chosen profession. But it's the human element that we bring to it. So it really will be important to say it will be a measure of success. It will attract employees. It will attract customers. And so when we link that with sustainability, it's likely to impact things like funding as well. So, when organisations are going out for and trying to secure business loans, if they don't have all of their, I'm going to say, ducks in a row, and not just tokenistic policies, but they're able to demonstrate that they do have those inclusivity and sustainability policies, they're unlikely to attract funding, stakeholders, investors, all of those things. So it's going to be it is a key measure of success. So organisations, if they're not on with kind of dealing with it, I'm going to say, buy my book. You've literally got a roadmap, you really do need to be leading into that. It's going to be important.
Well, buying the book is a much more cost-effective investment than losing your talent if you don't invest in this. And I work in the talent space, as a recruiter, and we know that those that really get this, they're able to retain their talent and attract their talent way better than those that haven't quite caught up with what the market is doing. And I think that's really important. And there's a lot of, recent studies that said HR's biggest challenge, and those listening may or may not agree with this, 80% hopefully will, because that's the statistic said, that actually recruiting talent is probably their biggest challenge. And obviously retaining it as well. So this is absolutely central to that equation. To getting successful retention and successful attraction policies in place, you need to have an inclusive culture where people can feel like you're the best place to work. It's what the new workforce is looking for as well. And they are looking for what people are doing on the sustainability side of things as well. It's forming part of that decision-making process. You highlighted the pandemic, as you said, we're not out of it completely yet. I've lost half my workforce last week to COVID, so it's definitely still around. But the reality is it did make people reflect, and it was called the Great Resignation in the media. We called it here at JJ Recruitment the Great Awakening. And I think that's where people really, as you said, took stock and said, is this who I want to work for? Is this how I want to work? And what do I want to do with my life? And we saw huge shifts in workforces. And I think that didn't wake everybody up to what's happening right now. Then nothing really will. So your book will be a great blueprint for helping you to do that. I noticed, I like noticing language, and I think it's the second time you mentioned the word tokenistic. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. How can HR leaders then move an organisation from tokenistic or tick box type processes into true transformation?
Yeah, I think so. It's about, it's the same, making sure that you're embedding whatever you're working upon. You have to kind of understand, what is the reason for doing this? Are we just doing it because we're ticking a box? Are we doing it because our competitors are and we think we need to? Now, in a way, that may be the right thing to do. But as I say, what is the reason for doing this? Where is your initiative coming from? Has it come from your people? So, employee resource groups, for example, when organizations have those, they're a great way for organizations to really get that intel, what's happening within our organization, and how can we utilize I'm going to say their passion and their knowledge and their experience, which often isn't great, but without, as I say, getting them to continue to sort of relive all of those things, how do we utilize that to shape solutions that will really make a difference? And then I think once you've kind of got to the bottom of all of those, it is about holding individuals to account. And I use the word individuals loosely because I go back to the model that we've created, which is all around the role that everybody plays. So certainly for us, we would encourage organizations to set inclusivity as part of everybody's performance development review or annual appraisal, or whatever your own organizations happen to call it. So how do they play their part when it comes to inclusivity? But certainly, as I say, as you move up the rankings, as it were, how are leaders and executives held to account? Some organizations tie it in with bonus structures. They become champions, as I say, in particular key areas, but there has to be that measurement that is part of it. And those are the things that are going to start to move it from, let's just have these initiatives, to suddenly something that becomes part of everyday practice within an organization and moves it beyond that tokenistic approach. What are the learnings from it? How can we become curious? And how does it shape our organization, our culture, our people practices, and our customer experiences as well, actually?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think something that resonates when you mentioned the word individuals here. There's an old cliche, but when we hear a cliche, sometimes it means we should listen to them. And that's the old, it only takes one bad apple to spoil a bunch. But actually, one individual that's not following an organization's path towards a more inclusive culture, for example, actually, toxicity can spread quite quickly. And as part of HR, it is a truly authentic, organic process that you want to achieve a more inclusive culture in your business. Then HR professionals have to be willing to challenge those individuals when they're not getting on board, and sometimes make those very difficult decisions. The role of HR isn't easy, as we know, but if we really do believe that this is the right future for our organisations, then we need to be able to identify where those blockages are and be willing to challenge and move forward. Now, I couldn't have this show. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say it is. However, it's really fascinating. So for us, I would want to spend some time with that individual, and I'd really want to get to the bottom of, what is it that they see and they're experiencing for them to feel resistant, to not want to be in an organisation that actually meant that they felt like they belonged as well. And it goes back to the conversation we had before around, I'm going to say, diversity fatigue, when actually, you know, we sit down and say, tell me about your unique difference. Tell me about what you bring to an organization and the world, actually, your society, your family, whatever. Tell me about you know, who you are. And you could then just say, bring in those protected characteristics. And as you say, some of them can change in a heartbeat, actually, sure. Certainly from I'm going to say, ability or disability perspective. And when we start to unpick some of those, it's at that point that individuals, the lights kind of do go on and they go, okay, this is about me. And these are the contributions that I can make. So as I say, I do accept there are some individuals, and I guess I bring that back to, I remember doing a coaching program. We ran a big transformation program out for a client out in Germany. And so they've got very, very different labour laws. And I remember having a conversation with one individual, and the CEO and the finance director at the time started laughing when they asked me to speak to him, and I sort of said, okay, do you want to let me in on the secret? And they said, okay, well, do you know what, this individual, he's quite difficult, he's quite arrogant, probably won't last more than 5 minutes having a conversation with him, because within 5 minutes he'll have looked at his watch, he'll have put his feet on the desk, his hands behind his head, and then after 5 minutes he'll get up and go out the room. So I sort of said, okay, well, thanks for the heads up. At least I know it's nothing personal then if it happens. But I have to say, we had an hour and a half together in that room, and at no point did he put his hands behind his head or look at his watch. And it was because the conversation, dare I say, was about him. And he was really encouraged in that safe space to think about himself, think about the contribution he was making, to think about the impact that he was having versus the impact that he wanted to have. And as a consequence, the things that he needed to do to change. And I'm an executive.
Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People approach, right? And I get it can work, although there will be some listening to this where there are just, unfortunately, misogyny still exists in the workplace. Yeah. So it could be other individuals where you would approach the room and actually they'd have been standoffish from the start. And I do still think there's a problem within some organisations or individuals, should I say, with ego, and there are always going to be sometimes occasions where people just can't change. But they say if they won't change, then something else needs to, right? Or they need to change what they're doing. I just want to give some sympathy, I guess, for the HR leaders out there listening who may be able to, resonate with an individual they're really struggling with. And I think the Dale Carnegie approach is great. Make it about them, I try and understand their reasons. But I think that's going to be a whole podcast about that in itself. But I'm keen to talk about the fact that, in conscious time, you are one of only 50 people that work as part of the UK Female Entrepreneurship Ambassador. So I understand it's run in partnership with Enterprising Women, Women's Business Centre, Forward Ladies and Leadership Directors, and it's part of the European Network of Female Entrepreneurship Ambassadors. Across 22 countries, 250 female entrepreneurs across Europe. I could not bring this to the fore. So I wonder if you could just tell the audience what that's about, your role within it, and I guess most importantly, why it's so essential we do inspire and promote female entrepreneurship among young women today.
Yeah, so I think that particular role then led me to have the opportunity to go on to do other things, and obviously now to be that kind of key business board member for the All-Party Parliamentary Group. So this was a programme that, as you say, was sort of set up really to think about the role and contribution that female entrepreneurs have in society, and certainly at the time they were. The numbers of women setting up their businesses was significantly lower than it absolutely is now. And so that forum really was an opportunity for us to come together to share successes and things that typically, say government and business infrastructures are getting right, but also to pool our collective thoughts in terms of, okay, what are we missing? And as a consequence, what might we need to be doing to influence others, as say, whether that be government or wider businesses, in terms of what else could we do? And of course, the scope of that now is much more broadened from that female space. We know that there is some quite significant work in the ethnic minority spaces, for example, in terms of setting up businesses. So that work, as I say, was really, really key. I did get the opportunity to go out to Brussels to one of their events, which was just amazing. And it's fabulous to hear experiences of other female entrepreneurs. And I have to say that was something that I really valued this year when I was fortunate enough to be a UK delegate at the UN Women's Conference. And again, the gift, the virtual world means that you can literally hear from, other female entrepreneurs from all around the world. But what was really, really key was we all had a passion for making a difference in the world and in society. And those are the things for me that really excite me around this ability for us to have that sense of belonging, that real difference that we can make, and inclusivity. So there was that golden thread and that opportunity to really have that seat and that voice to be able to go on to influence others.
Your passion definitely comes through. And interestingly, we started this show really talking about mentoring with Bill. And actually, it's almost there. You're talking again the power of peer-to-peer mentoring, which shouldn't be underestimated. The power of community, which for those, we know there's a lot of burnout in the world of HR at the minute. For those that are struggling, there are communities out there, no matter what your role within the world of HR might be. Go and search them out, whether on LinkedIn or the social networks that exist, or reach out to colleagues or past bosses. Because there's a real world community out there willing to support. And I think the power of peer-to-peer networking you can support there right at the top level, I think is absolutely fantastic. So my last question before we open the HR L&D vault, because I wanted to unlock some expertise that you have and your visionary way of looking at things, Teresa. What do you think are going to be the HR trends that HR leaders need to start preparing for now? And do you have any tips, perhaps, that can help them to prepare for those trends with us?
Gosh, what are the trends? Well, I don't know that it's anything necessarily new. I think it's just a reinforcement and maybe a evolving of some of the initiatives that they've been working on, certainly during COVID and post-COVID. So, many organizations were able to move into, or had to actually move into, a space in terms of working patterns. So flexibility, the hybrid working. Many organizations previously would never entertain anybody working from home. And now suddenly it was like an almost overnight switch that people had to turn on. And I still see some organizations wanting to return to how it was before. And this is the role, I'm going to say, where HR really do have to lean into, because I think whilst there is absolutely a need for some people to, and the desire for them to want to come back together in a physical place, and of course, some jobs might have to physically be done at a physical place as well. But there is that real need in terms of how do we create an environment whereby there is a degree of flexibility. And we have to balance that, of course, with the fact that a job needs to be done. A product or as a service has to be delivered. So I think HR really have that role to play there in terms of what does flexible working really look and feel like in this kind of environment that we find ourselves in. And again, we link that through then to things like reward. How do we make sure that our reward structures are not just favouring those that are present? So we talk about kind of presenteeism, and we're making sure that they are robust and equitable, and I use the word reward in the broadest sense, in the sense of what benefits do we offer, what facilities that we may historically have offered in a physical space, how do we ensure that we are able to either continue to offer them in a remote environment as well, or we just don't offer them at all. So it's those types of things. I think the other space that HR will have to support their leaders in actually is maybe a slightly controversial one, in terms of, I think employees are now looking to their leaders for activism, and they want to know where they really stand on things like inclusivity, on sustainability, and it's not enough just to hide behind a policy or an empty pledge on a website or an email, in a town hall or whatever. So I think, HR have a real role to play in terms of supporting their leadership about what does activism really, really look and feel like. And I'm going to say, kind of linked with that then, is the development of those real inclusive leadership behaviours. So what does that mean? Because again, you'll probably know this from your hiring spaces, organisations are really looking now for very different leadership qualities. And so when they're not quite there, how do we provide that learning and that support space to help them? And of course, we've got the usual, attraction, recruitment, all of those things as well, which, they'll be incredibly well honed on. But
I think you've articulated perfectly that the HR profession is not easy for leaders out there, right? There's a lot of things on that agenda. We believe today on this station, I hope it's come across, that inclusivity should certainly be right near the top of that agenda. But then we know that's a really challenging role. We know there's a lot of plate spinning involved for those listening to this show. Hopefully there are some tips from Teresa to help you navigate those a little bit more easily than perhaps, have we not done today's show? And I think there's been so many nuggets of and insights that people can take away from today's show, Teresa. I'm really, really thankful for you taking your time to be with us. We're going to open the HR L&D vault. So these are 3 short, sharp questions for you, for our audience. And the first one is this: if you could give one piece of advice to the world, what would it be?
Oh, to the world. Okay, I would really encourage you to take a moment to pause and to really think about how you can align your passion and your purpose to make a difference in the world.
Fantastic. I don't need no commentary needed for that. Wonderful. If you had the opportunity, what advice would you give to a younger you just starting out in this new world of work?
Gosh, a younger me. I would say you need to continue to be tenacious. So I think the T in Teresa is tenacious, without a shadow of a doubt. However, I also believe it's really important to be curious, and to, just because somebody offers you a thought or a view that may be different than yours, there is that opportunity just to pause and go, okay, help me to understand that. So I'm a great believer of questions, and almost, turning that back. What am I learning from this experience? So I think say tenacious, nice. Keep going, but become really curious.
I'm really curious. Well, actually, you said that leadership has changed a moment ago, and actually that links very closely to what a coaching culture is all about, is asking questions and empowerment and things like that. So, great response. And last but not least, what is the one guiding principle behavior that you've seen in every great leader that you've worked with?
I think every great leader, actually, that I have worked with has been super, super authentic. They have been true to who they are, and they are not afraid to, I'm going to say, admit when they're wrong, actually, or to say, I don't know. Because we can't know. People do look to us as leaders to have the answers, but it's better to say, I don't know, but I'm going to come back to you on that, than it is to fudge it, quite frankly, which some people do, because that's really not going to cut the mustard. So, to as I say, be curious, but be authentic, be who you are. I think those things are going to be key going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think also being authentic in the way that you've mentioned it there, but not, someone's admitting when we're not always right, shows vulnerability. And we can see the power of vulnerability in engaging a workforce and how contagious that can be as well. So people can bring their best selves to work. I think is really powerful. And that's what I would see as one of the, as you, in full agreement, the great leaders now are really bringing to the workforce. So yeah, great response. Well, look, it's been a real fascinating conversation today, Teresa. Thank you ever so much for joining me. Of course, for those that want to find out more about your services, you can go to junglehr.com. There will be a link in the show notes. For those that want to find out more about what Jungle HR do, well, they provide a range of services from executive coaching, change management, organizational design, business transformation, employee engagement, communication strategy, mediation, and more. It's full of a wealth of resources, blogs, links. So please do check out that site. Whether or not you think you need the services right now, I guarantee there'll be something on that site for you to take away and use in your business. So please do take a look. That's junglehr.com. I will also include a link to inclusion247.com, where of course you can find the wonderful book Closing the Gap. Is available on paperback for $14.99 or on Kindle edition, I think, is $6.99. I'll also, last but not least, include her LinkedIn profile for Teresa as well, for those that do want to connect and find out more and perhaps reach out to Teresa about her services. Of course, if you are an HR L&D professional listening to this show and you are having challenges trying to recruit HR talent, well, that's where we can come in. So please do get in touch with either myself, my wonderful team here at jgarecruitment.com. That link will also be in the show notes. And if you are interested, just because we mentioned it today, in the planet positive recruitment solution that we do offer our clients that can actually support your ESG targets, then please do inquire about that as well. I believe we're one of the only recruiters offering this level of service. And we only found it actually because we wanted to make our office carbon neutral. We invested in a company to make us do that. And then we asked them, can we do this for our clients? And they said yes. And they created a bespoke solution for us. So we believe it's original. Hopefully it'll engage you if you're interested in those ESG targets for yourself and you want to utilize our recruitment services. Do give us a call. Just leaves me to say one huge final thank you to Teresa Boughey for joining me today on the HR L&D podcast. I look forward to bringing you the next episode real soon. Teresa, thank you ever so much.
That's it for today's episode of the HR L&D podcast. I hope you found this discussion informative and thought-provoking, and that it gave you actionable insights to help you drive your HR agenda forward. Please remember to subscribe to the show so you never miss a future episode, and I'd also love to hear from you. So if you enjoyed this show, please do leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps me to ensure I can continue to bring you the topics and guests that matter most to you. Oh, and don't forget to share this show with your colleagues and fellow HR leaders as well. The more we spread the word, the more we can grow our community of HR professionals who I know are all as dedicated to driving the future of work forward as I am. Thanks, of course, for tuning in. My name is Nick Gay. Please do look me up on LinkedIn and send me a connection request. It would be great to get connected. In the meantime, I look forward to bringing you the next episode of the HR L&D podcast real soon.